Every offseason, it seems like Raptors forward OG Anunoby is linked in countless trade rumors, and it was especially apparent in this offseason after reports were coming out that OG Anunoby was unhappy with his role in Toronto. Well, in today's video, I'm going to go through why his role this season may not be any different to the previous one, and why that should actually be a good thing for this ascending Raptors team. Let's get into it. What's going on, NBA and Raptors fans? It's Jacob here, back with Amateur Sports for another Toronto Raptors YouTube video on this channel. I bring you the greatest coverage and analysis on the latest Toronto Raptors news, so if that is of interest to you, then make sure you are subscribed to the channel. You can help me road to 12,000 subscribers, getting really close to that milestone. And if you find yourself enjoying along the way, be sure to drop a like to give that extra bit of support to the channel. Sorry for the little bit of a hiatus. Last video was on Tuesday. Just too much came up on Thursday for me to do a video there, but happy to get one in today talking about OG Anunoby. And this is something that I've alluded to many times on my channel regarding OG Anunoby's role, what it looks like this season compared to what it looked like last season. Because, last season there were those big discussions about him not really enjoying his role, wanting a bigger role with the team. And, the rumor mill was turning, especially right before the NBA draft. Reports from Bleacher Report, reporters like Jake Fisher. Now, I thought those reports were inaccurate and damaging, but I thought there may have been a little bit of validity to that with OG Anunoby wanting a bigger role of the team. And that's really what you want with your players. You want players to be hungry to get a difference of a role. You want them to want to ascend. If the guy is just content with where he is, not being like one of the best players in the league, then you kind of question that. Why don't you want to get better? So I thought it was healthy, and I thought, having some sort of a little bit of competitiveness for playtime and touch on the team, a little bit of friendly competition, that really does not hurt any team here. But we have to discuss OG Anunoby and what his development is going to look like going forward, because I think the discussions for OG's development right now are a lot different to what they were 2 years ago, even 1 year ago, as to what we really thought OG could achieve in his NBA career. He's not an old player by any stretch of the imagination, in his mid-20s, and still there is a lot of room to grow. But I think there really needs to be a big conversation into how he's focusing on his development, because I'm sure OG Anunoby's working every offseason to make himself better, but the conversation needs to be a little bit more fine-tuned, because like 2 years ago, we were talking about this guy at like 23 years old that he had the potential to be the next sort of Kawhi Leonard, or maybe not ascending to that level of Kawhi Leonard. I mean, how many people can actually achieve those sort of levels, but to a level where OG could be a focal point of a team on offense. And I think as this season goes on, that sort of hope that he gets to that point is kind of fading a little bit. If you still think he can get to that point, I think you might need yourself a little bit of a reality check here, because OG Anunoby is a great player already, no doubt, but we have to manage our expectations in terms of how far he can really go. If we take a look at his stats from last season, this will really showcase the point that I'm about to make. So he upped his points per game to 17.1 points per game. That was a career high, but the field goal percentages from this season were a lot different to what they were in the previous season. We go to the tank season, the Tampa season, where he was averaging like almost 50% from the field and almost 40% from three. Like, those are fantastic numbers. And you go to the most recent season, sure, his production up from a points per game standpoint, but there was a sharp decline in the field goal percentages and maybe a little bit of a decline in the three-point percentage. I'm not too worried about that. But the field goal percentage is where I'm going to have my look at here, because it did drop from nearly 50% to under 45%. So why did that happen exactly for OG? And now you could talk about, well, in the Tampa season, he was seeing more of the ball. So his production in terms of field goal percentage, well, he was getting more of the ball, getting to the rim more often. That's why his percentages were better in that regard. But that's not exactly what happened when you go into a little bit of a deep dive here. Not that much of a deep dive, really. But then you look at the 2-point percentage, which is something that, myself, I really need to start paying attention to a little bit more. We saw that OG Anunoby's 2-point percentage in the 2020-2021 season, the Tampa Tank season, we saw that his percentages there were about 56%, which is very good. Now, what he was doing well in this Tampa season was being aggressive and getting to the rim. This season, we kind of wanted to see him grow a little bit more, maybe add in that third level in that mid-range game, and his 2-point percentage dropped from 56 all the way down to 51. And we can see with the 3-point percentage dropping a little bit and him taking almost 2 more attempts per game from 2-point range, we see that with that sharp decline in that statistic, in the 2-point percentage, that OG Anunoby's field goal percentage in general dropped. Now, what was different about this season compared to that Tampa season was that this season, like I said, we wanted to kind of unlock that third level, that mid-range game, but OG just wasn't really capable of doing it. And, if you go through analytics, which I have done extensively in the past, the mid-range shot really isn't that good of a shot. It should be exclusive to the big and best players who really need it, like Pascal Siakam. He's a very efficient mid-range shooter, so, we should continue to allow him to do that. But what the mid-range does to Pascal Siakam's game is that it makes the defense a little bit more honest. They have to respect that mid-range shot, which gives Pascal Siakam a lot more space on the interior to get to the rim. Having all these different options makes the defense guess what he's going to do, which makes all the other assets to his game a little bit more easier to achieve. But for OG Anunoby, that's just not the sort of player that he is, and we don't really need him to be that player at this point. I think the future of the Raptors, OG Anunoby can be a big part of it, but Pascal Siakam right now is the focal point of the offense, and we're preparing for a reality where Scottie Barnes turns into the focal point of the offense. We don't need somebody else to take on that role. We don't need OG to take on that role. What we need OG to do is play to his strengths. His strengths are getting to the rim, but more importantly, it's shooting threes and it is playing defense. He's one of the best defenders in the league, so we don't need him to add in that mid-range game. In fact, if you really dive into the deep analytics of it, the Raptors are worse off with him shooting those mid-range shots. So if you take away those mid-range shots, and also, you look at Fred VanVleet, he should take less of those mid-range shots. Gary Trent, maybe slightly less. Leave it to guys like Scottie Barnes and Pascal Siakam is what the Raptors should be predominantly focusing on. But for OG Anunoby specifically, he is so good at shooting threes and spacing the floor in offense. He is very good at kind of getting downhill, getting to the rim. Maybe not as much with the ball in his hands, but those cuts to the rim, those are a vital part of his game. And of course, the defensive part. So the next step in OG Anunoby's development shouldn't be scaling up to add in more tools to his game. It should actually be scaling down. It should be completely focused on the specific aspects that he already does well. Instead of trying to be a B plus in every category, the focus for a player like him, who is such a good complementary player to a very good core, the focus for him should be to be an A plus in these specific categories that we need him to be that in, because that is what's really going to help get this team to the next level. And he is really sharp in the three-point shooting, when he is extremely sharp as the on-ball defender and the off-ball defender, which he already is. You can see that when he's injured, the Raptors defense takes a huge step back. He's such a pivotal part of our team defensively. Offensively, a big part. Let's make that three-point shot even scarier. Let's make that interior game right at the rim even scarier and focus on those specific aspects rather than trying to add in those other things that could take away from the development in these key categories that I am speaking of. There's a big famous Bruce Lee quote that I like to use here. I fear not the man, it said something like this: I fear not the man who has practiced 1,000 kicks one time, but I do fear the man who's practiced one kick 1,000 times. Because if you only focus on that one thing 1,000 times, a specific example, for that specific quote, you are going to be so good at that one thing that you are so worried about that you maybe won't even be able to stop that one thing, even though that you know it is coming, rather than just being adequate at all of these other things. Really focus on the specific things that are going to help this team get to the next level, because the reality is we don't need him to take on that jump, and at this point in his development, you really can't see him getting to that sort of elite scoring level. Like, we're fine. If this is the best that OG Anunoby is ever going to be, that is still like an excellent player and a very good complementary player. And as I was saying in the intro, like, that is why there are so many different teams constantly linked in trade reports for this player, because they understand, like, this is the perfect complementary player to a team that has star scoring players in the team. Like, think about the Memphis Grizzlies. How much better would that be team with a player like OG Anunoby at the 3 spot to complement the already great players in that team? And even still, being the complementary player, he is good enough to still average 17 points per game, and I know he's capable of getting up to 18, 19 points per game. So having that player on your team is key to success going forward, and the Raptors recognize that, which is why they've always maintained such a reluctance to trade him, and why they've always had such a high asking price for the player. But less is actually going to be more with OG Anunoby's development, because we need to focus on these specific things to get him an A+ in those specific categories, rather than working on all these different things and making him like a B+ in all those categories. Really dial in at what makes OG Anunoby great, and make those things even better. That will just make the job easier for everybody else on the court, the big players like Siakam and like Scotty Barnes is going to be. I think that is going to be the biggest difference maker in helping OG with his development on the Raptors and the development of the core in general. Now, you could talk about OG Anunoby and his role not being happy with it this season, but I think if you kind of pitch him this idea and he understands how he can help the team and what he's really going to do to make this team better, I think there's going to be a bigger understanding if you have that conversation with him. And this isn't necessarily scaling back his role with the team. You can give him some more touch on the outside, but when he gets those touches, he needs to be doing these specific things that make him great rather than trying to add in other things that maybe hinder his game that he's not realizing. It's very difficult for somebody to really understand these sort of things that I'm kind of bringing up, especially a player who does want to, be effective in the mid-range here. But the reality is, what is going to make him great is dialing in on these specific things, and I think that is going to be key for the Raptors going forward. OG Anunoby can be a huge part of this Raptors team that wants to resurface themselves as a contender here, and it's not going to happen this season. They're going to be a great team this season, I believe, but it's not going to be a contender sort of season. Can we do that in 2 years' time? We have a great possibility of doing that, especially with Scotty Barnes on the team. And players like OG Anunoby are going to help this team get to that level, no doubt about it. So what do you guys think of this piece on OG Anunoby? Do you think less is more for OG's development, as I said, or do you still believe he can get to that point where he's using everything? He's got all the tools, everything in his bag on offense. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment down below, because that is it for me for today's video. Thank you so much for watching this one. Please, if you did enjoy, drop a like on the video. It does go a long way to supporting the channel, because when you drop a like, it lets YouTube know to recommend this video to other people of similar interest to you. Helps me out a lot. It only takes you a second. And make sure, if you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe to Amateur Hour Sports for the greatest coverage and analysis on the latest Toronto Raptors news 3, sometimes 4 times a week on this channel. Check out the Discord, check out my streams, and get prepared. Watch parties for Raptors games are coming back to YouTube starting for the preseason games. Hope to see you there, and I'll see you again next time for another video.